Hello and welcome to the SHIPSHAPE podcast, a series of podcasts where we meet amazing people and talk about their experiences, personal, technical, and all related to the maritime world. Come and dive in, and dive in, and dive in, and dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome to the SHIPSHAPE podcast. This is Talha Bhatti, and with me is Meryl Charette, and we are aboard our boats. And today we have with us another liveaboard who has actually sort of taken that to heart. He's been all around the world. He's been doing this since he was a really young lad. We're going to find out what his experiences look like. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you.
Robert, where are you recording this episode from?
I'm sitting on a mooring off of the little yacht club that I grew up at, Nyack Bay Yacht Club in southeastern Connecticut.
Oh, you're in Connecticut,
Nice.
huh?
Mm-hmm.
What are you using for Wi-Fi?
I have it's a little bit of a liveaboard tip, actually, if anybody wants it. It's on the T-Mobile network. It's a little Wi-Fi box that a nonprofit called Calyx Institute they sell you a year-long subscription in the little box, and it's cheaper than home, and it's no limit. So it's stateside. It's really nice.
Sweet. And so like we said, you've been doing this for a while, and you find yourself in Connecticut often. What does your routine look like? Are you a proper thoroughbred snowbird?
I am, yeah. I went to school in Rochester, New York, and my dad's from Fargo, North Dakota, so I felt that I've paid my dues to the cold. I'm in Connecticut. I'm in Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New England in general from about May until October. And then I take the boat that I captain and my own boat in two separate trips south to the Caribbean for the winter. And I've been doing that with my boat for 6 years and the boat I captain for 3. So I'm a proper snowbird. I'll come back for Christmas, but that's about it.
Tell us more about your boat.
Yeah, this is I'm living on a Pearson 424, cutter-rigged Pearson 424,
And
42
for
foot,
listeners, what does that mean?
1982.
Break it down a little.
Yeah, sure. It's a cutter-rigged sloop, single mast. I've got a proper staysail, so I've got 2 head sails on 4 stays, and the staysail is a fill the slot. It gives you a nice extra boost. It's an older style of sailing. Sloops are much more of the big Genoa nowadays, but I'll run 2 head sails all the time, and then in storms you get rid of that forward one and run just the staysail and a heavily reefed main or a trysail. And it's a boat with I carry a lot of sails, and I've got a lot of options at sea. So I'm pretty much always comfortable even when it's really nasty out.
So when you were in Rochester, New York, were you going to RIT?
That's right. Yeah, I went to RIT for photojournalism and sociology. I minored in sociology.
And then at what point did you start getting into like professional boating and making a living doing that?
I never intended to. I was working as a wedding photographer after RIT, which is it gives me a similar amount of freedom, or it gave me a similar amount of freedom. And I still do it on a, friends and referrals basis, which is, I don't really need to do more than 3 or 4 a year to keep my photo skills sharp. I'm done with the days of 30 weddings a year though. Yeah, I graduated RIT and working in photojournalism and the areas around that, documentary, stuff like that. It's all about being in New York City. And I just didn't want to pay the rent. So I got a van. I was always going out and racing. I grew up racing dinghies, especially lasers, but I'll crew for people at this club on Atlantics and Ensigns and J24s and a whole bunch of other one design boats. So I was just sailing as a hobby. I knew I wanted to live aboard a boat though. Couldn't afford it yet, so I had the van. And I intended to buy my own. And the boat that I'm on is my grandparents' boat. And
Nice.
It just 42 feet at that time. My mom has a 27. I thought 42 was just way too big. But the things had fallen apart a little bit with the yard that did the maintenance, and that brought the value down to something that was affordable for me. So I bought out family, and I've been on this boat ever since. That was about 6 years ago.
Well,
Very nice.
it sounds like it's definitely bigger than a van. What was living on the van like? Where'd you park the thing? Like, did you build an interior? What was that?
I did. I built I even framed out a bathroom. I never really used it. I pretty much went to convenience stores and friends' places in New York. I was assisted by some very good friends. So I was basically camping in Brooklyn and was fortunately I would take bucket showers in it. I didn't have to do any of the awful van part of it. But the parking part is really easy in New York. It's actually harder almost everywhere else,
Really?
because New York has street cleaning, so they know that nobody's staying around for. If they see a van parked there, it looks like a work van, and they know it's being moved, so nobody bothers you. It's actually really not bad, other than you have to move once or twice a week for street cleaning.
All I can picture is like Scooby-Doo for some reason.
It's pretty similar. Mine was a white van with like you could still see the end of the lettering that the plumber I bought it from had his lettering on, and he like peeled it off in a haste as he sold it to me. You could still see the residue from it. But
so it gives you lots of mobility. So did you make it to like, because you were doing photojournalism anyway, did you like show up at like the scene and like how did you use it?
Nothing really for the strictly photojournalism part, but I had some. It was really nice. I 6 or 7 times I drove to a wedding that was pretty far away, and so I'd be getting off of a wedding at midnight, and otherwise I'd have to drive 2 or 3 hours home, and instead I just slept in my van in the parking lot, and that was awesome. I put a boat hatch up in the top of it because marine is what I know. I've always been around boats, so I outfitted the van like I knew how to do a boat. So I bought a deck hatch, a Lumar hatch from a consignment store for like $30, and cut a hole in the top of the van and put it in there, and it's a windowless van otherwise. So I had this skylight above my bed, and I would stand up on the bed and climb out onto the roof and like put a mattress down on the roof and lay out there at night. It was great. I mean, it's harder than boat life, but it's similar. And I was halfway there, and that was really what it was for. I just needed to not spend money while I got ready to get on a boat.
So
take us back though, like this boat life started way back. Like how young were you when you got on your first boat?
I think I was probably 6 or 7 when my mom, well, that's not even far enough back. When I was a baby, I have pictures of myself as a toddler in the companionway of this boat when it was my grandparents. They bought it the year I was born, which is a coincidence, not related. But I have pictures of myself in the companionway on this boat at toddler age. But my mom put me in a boat. The first time I was driving a boat was around 6 or 7. We had a little Dyer knockoff. That just a little rowing dinghy with a sail, and so she had me driving it. I don't think I really knew how to sail, but at 7 or so. And then my mom was just obsessed, and she saw that I liked it, and she wasn't a pushy person, but if it was something we were interested in, she wanted to pull out the stops because she didn't have these opportunities when she was a kid. She had to do it all herself. And so she put me into lessons in an Optimist when I think I was 8. I could have been even 7. I think I was 8 though. And they do it now. They double kids up and put an instructor in the boat and stuff usually. But in the late 90s, they would just
send you out.
one kid per boat, chuck you in it. Yeah, and the slips that were it's right at this club. I learned 100 feet away from where I am, and the slips that are facing the ramp dock were all very understanding boat owners, because the first couple of days of lessons guaranteed one kid's gonna like come off on a screaming reach and just slam into the back of someone's boat. And so the club we're a working club, and so a club member would volunteer. We have a couple of really good gel coaters here, and we all do the work at the club. We take the docks in and out, and so we have a lot of handy people, so someone would always fix it up better than it was originally. But actually a couple of years ago I got back on my boat, and I pulled up to the courtesy dock here and passed out at 6 a.m. And about 9 a.m, I was woken up by an Opti slamming into the back of my boat. So it came full circle.
Wow.
I started racing Optis when I was, I think 9 was my first race, and I just was obsessed. It was my thing. So
whatever happened to the van?
I still have it. I think I'm selling it this year. It's I always think, and I have taken a couple of trips since I've been on the boat, but mostly I store it, and I'm tired of engines. I got rid of my diesel in this boat for an electric. I maintain 2 diesels on the workboat and 1 outboard for my boat, and that's enough. I'm going to get rid of the van because it's got a diesel in it, and I don't want to deal with that anymore.
Talk about the electric engine. What was the thinking behind deciding to get that? Were you just tired of engines?
Yeah, I don't use my boat that way. I sail. I do more than 5,000 miles a year on my boat, and I think I averaged probably 80 hours a year on the diesel. And, you're a lot better off if you put in a nice new Beta Marine or something. But I had this rusty monster that I was keeping going with wishes and prayers and $1,000 a pop. And I was using it for, 80 hours a year for anybody who's going consistently from Connecticut to the Caribbean, or Connecticut even worse, Connecticut to Florida to the Caribbean. If you're doing and back, and if you're doing that every year and only putting 80 hours a year on the diesel, when you have to rebuild a water pump for $500, it's insane.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
There's an eco part of it too. I think that it's by far not the main reason, because battery technology is a complicated, evolving thing right now. But the electric has essentially no maintenance. You have to clean electrical contacts, make sure it looks good, but they're going to run 10,000 hours like a top. And that's not the case with a diesel. It's just something you don't have to think about it anymore. And I think engineless sailors are the best sailors in the world. And if I was on anything less than 37 feet, I might have gone engineless with a sculling oar, maybe an outboard as a backup. And I couldn't quite stomach that, not for the offshore part, but because of inlets and close quarters stuff with 42 feet. And I do a lot of single-handed. I couldn't quite stomach it. So electric was the closest thing to engineless for me. But I will say, once I put it in, it's way beyond engineless. There's a lot of benefits. This infinite power, huge battery bank. While I'm sailing, I can put the thing in reverse and charge my battery bank. Those are all real benefits.
So give us, what does the system look like? What did you have initially? What did you have to rip out? Did you put all of this up anywhere? Is it like a how to convert your boat to electric anywhere yet?
I've not been good at social media. I really should be better as a photographer, but I do
you're
have
a photographer. Okay.
It's nuts. What it is I'm a photographer and I'm a sailor. And when I'm a photographer, I'm a photographer. And when I'm a sailor, I'm a sailor. And I don't mix them that much. And I should do more, because that's the world we live in. But the only thing right now that I have up is I have a series of stories. I forget even what it's called, but you can click it and see the series of stories of me ripping out the diesel. I did it pretty much all myself, which is part of the liveaboard and offshore thing. But did that excite you, or did that scare you? It scared me. Part? Yeah. It scared me, but I spent a little extra on the system. One of the common ones in the United States is electric yachts, and you don't have to do the machining, gear reduction. You don't have to do any of the programming and stuff, which are things that I sort of like and I could probably wrap my head around, but I wanted to make sure I could get it done on something of a schedule. So, I spent $9,000 on the electric motor instead of $5,000 for a DIY. And it was like adult Legos, or at least once you've been living aboard a boat for a little while, I'd say it's about the same as it's like if you're putting in a new windlass. It's about that level of installation. You got to run some big cable and do some crimping, and there's some creative difficulties, but it's not that bad. It's adult Legos.
So, and is this like a sail drive, or did you replace the old one?
Yeah, a sail drive would have been a little bit more involved with fiberglass work and stuff. I just so my layout, I had a 71 horsepower Westerbeek diesel, and it's situated backwards in my boat because a lot of fin skeg aft cockpit boats do not have the space to have a diesel facing forward and have the prop come out of the right spot. So mine's in reverse, and then there was what's called a V drive in the bilge. Yeah. And some people will be aware of what that is, and a lot of people won't be, because
it looks really cool though. Yeah,
exactly.
You see the first time, you're like, what is that thing?
Yeah. And it ended up being a huge benefit for my installation, because what it meant is my electric motor fit in the bilge where the V drive was. So it just drives straight out. Electric motors don't need a transmission. It goes forward and reverse when you reverse the polarity. So the throttle takes care of all of that stuff. You just need a belt reduction, but that's very small compared to a transmission.
So maybe we can visualize it a little better. So a V drive is usually when the motor is on top and there's sort of V there, and the shaft is connected on that side. And then you're saying you just eliminated this and just stuck the motor here.
Exactly. So right? My motor is in the bilge, and the engine compartment is empty. So I took apart the covers for that. It's right under the companionway where my engine was, like it should be. And but because nothing went there, I took apart the engine covers, and I decked over. You could see now the engine sits basically on stringers in the bilge, and I decked over those stringers, and I put a huge workbench. I mean, in terms of 42-foot boat, huge. I mean, it's still not a huge space, but but I put a big workbench and drawers for tools, so I can take my companionway stairs off and sit down at a vise and open up drawers to get my tools out. It's pretty great, and it's smaller than the old engine was. And then behind the engine was the fuel tank, and I pulled that out and sold it for scrap and put in 12 lithium valence used lithium batteries, lithium iron phosphate batteries.
And was that a good deal? How much did that run you?
I think I paid $4,500 about a year ago for 21 kilowatt hours of. What? That's cheap, right? It's still cheap.
Yeah, that's nuts. Who gave you that deal?
About the only time I'll ever say thanks, Trump. So Obama put in a bunch of government deals to stimulate electric vehicles. So Frito-Lay as a company took advantage of that, and all of the delivery vehicles in the Obama years around New York City were electric. All the Frito-Lay delivery vehicles were electric, and they were using lithium iron phosphate batteries. They were one of the first to do so. I have an electric car, and it's not lithium iron phosphate. Lithium iron phosphate is the only one, I think, at this point that's safe on boats. And there's still things you need to do to be safe, but but most vehicles don't have it. Most vehicles are much less stable and lithium technologies. But Trump killed off those benefits, and Frito-Lay said it's not worth it anymore. So they just sold all the trucks, and people were buying the trucks and yanking the batteries out. And I bought the batteries from someone. And I mean, they're like, I think the batteries the batteries I had like 100 cycles on it, which is nothing.
What? Nothing.
So,
and in the real world, brand new, this probably cost you $25,000.
Yeah. So since I've done this, I've tapped into a community that there are deals like this elsewhere. But yeah, you can't get like a set of Battleborn or something for this. But they're industrial batteries. They're very good. They're not drop-ins. So I did have to spend $800 on a battery management system on top of that. And then, I'm in for $6,000 on the batteries once you count big cables, because I'm moving up to 20 kilowatts for the motor. So I have big 2-aught and 4-aught cable, and that was expensive. All told, my battery setup is probably $6,000. So I spent $9,000 on the motor. I spent I'm up to 15 with the batteries. But and I added solar, and I can count that in. I'm under $20,000 for the whole thing. And that includes basically infinite power for house loads on the boat. And at these days, repowering a 42-foot sailboat, if you can find a rebuild engine, you can do it for under 10 grand, but you're in the 20-something thousand dollar range anyway.
Yep.
So it was a good deal for me. My range is ridiculous, but I don't use that range. And when I go out and motor around, I leave my boat and go to work, and when I come back, the tank is full. So,
well, as we speak about this, I got my Yanmar's acting up. If I replace that with one of these electric engines, I'll probably have a whole basement. But how you said that it was a 70 horsepower Westerbeek. How does horsepower translate with electric engines? Especially with a 42-foot boat.
My knowledge is pretty layperson, but I say horsepower doesn't translate because it's torque. It's about torque.
It's torque.
So my 20 kilowatt, I have two 10 kilowatt motors in series so that I can keep the voltage low at 48 volts. And my 20 kilowatt is, if you convert it to horsepower, I think it's something like 30 horsepower. And I had a 71 in here. The boat is spec'd at 58 horsepower. The previous engine swap, they decided they wanted more power. 30 horsepower doesn't translate to 60, 70 horsepower for a reason, and that's because of torque. My top speed is lower, which is what horsepower gives you, but my power is higher. And when I go full throttle, I'm doing maneuvers at the dock, I get this prop wash that comes out that is significantly more than I had before. The delivery is instantaneous too. So it makes docking, it makes maneuvers easier. If I'm using that full 20 kilowatts, my towing capacity is higher. My ability to torque is the ability to do work, and horsepower, I understand less, but it gives you a higher top speed. So, which I'm never doing, but if I want to full out, I'm doing 6.5, 7 in calm, maybe a little bit more than 7 knots. That old Westerbeek would give me hull speed, 7.8 knots, no problem. But the electric accelerates up to that speed faster, and it holds its speed at the same RPM into wind and seas better.
Nice.
So how long would let's say you're in a situation in which you have to motor for whatever reason, and how long could a battery bank like that last? I know that when you talk about batteries, it's like how many cycles they can do, and you obviously don't want to kill the batteries. How do you manage all of that?
Sure. I never want to go below 20%. I've actually never taken these batteries down below 48%. if you don't ever go below 20%, you're going to get at least 4,500 cycles off of lithium. So, I mean, back to the price question, if you're into a boat for the long term, lithium iron phosphate is going to kill lead acid battery price wise, because the best lead acid batteries are going to be, I think, 800 cycles. 4,500 cycles means you buy these batteries and you're good for decades. The range
then?
Yeah, if I'm running full out, which I never do, then I have less than an hour of range. So let's say 6 miles, But I just did a trip out, took my mom and sister out. We did our annual vacation to Block Island, and it's only 30 miles away, but it was really light wind, and it really was the exact use case that I expect for these. I motored to the dock, picked them up. I used 3 or 4% motoring pretty quick over to the dock, pick them up, get out of the mooring field. And then I put sails up, but it's only blowing like 5 or 6 knots. And this is a tank of a boat. So I might be doing 1 knot otherwise. I just added a little bit of silent, free power, and I'm doing 4 knots.
Nice.
And for the most part, we sailed out to Block Island that way. And when we arrived, I had 76% of my battery left, because I also have solar coming in. I was getting half as much solar as I was using in electric. So I left a lot in the tank because we didn't feel like we had to be out there super fast. But I've also never been someone, this boat, if you motor out at full speed, we're out there in 4 hours. And I'm happy sailing out silently for 7 hours if it's a really calm day but there was a little period of time on the way back that I was sailing at 6.5 knots, and I was putting almost a kilowatt back into the battery bank. So, but you sail out to Block Island, sit there, and it takes me 2 days. Sometimes if there's a rainy day in there, maybe 3 days to fill the tank back up.
I love you call it a tank. Yeah. Good stuff.
So one of the things that I've seen, because electric engines are becoming like more and more popular in boats. I was at the Newport Boat Show. I saw one electric sailboat, and it was like a 45-foot sailboat, but it had 2 electric engines on either side, like port and starboard. And so you could drive it almost like a power boat, right? With the 2 different, and you could do like 360s pretty easily. But one of the things that I saw, I don't know if you ran into this at all, is that when you're replacing kind of the diesel engine, which is heavy as all hell, and then also changing out the diesel tank, how does that affect the overall sailability of the boat? Like, how does
weight
that
distribution?
Sure. As long as the previous owner hasn't weighed down the boat and then changed the waterline, I think following the waterline is a really good measure of that. I think people are way too concerned about weight on, this is a displacement boat. Catamarans is a whole other thing. They're really weight sensitive, but displacement cruising boats, it's always good to get lighter. It's always good to, see more of that bottom paint come out of the water, to not carry a ton of stuff while you're cruising. But it's not a safety issue as much as, you have to be really laden to be a safety issue. Again, not the case in catamarans. That's a different world. My diesel engine weighed 700 pounds, and I had an 80-gallon fuel tank, which is, the tank itself was 50, 60 pounds, plus the diesel it was around 650, close to 700 pounds itself. Taking those out is a big shift. But on the other hand, that diesel tank is in there. The boat is designed expecting a 650-pound difference from empty to full. So that alone should tell us that you're not going to cause a stability issue when you delete 650 pounds from the boat. The other way of thinking about it is, if you have 3 big guys, you're not telling them where they're allowed to sleep or not sleep, or where they're allowed to sit or not sleep because you're afraid of capsizing or something. That 600, 700 pounds on a 42-foot boat is really not that much weight. When you're racing, putting crew out on the rail and stuff, but those are incremental gains. As far as cruising is concerned, I think people get too concerned about that weight. I see it a lot in forums talking about electric, and people should be concerned about safety, but I think the propane on the boat is a way bigger safety concern than weight, which I got rid of because now I have lithium.
How does it do on, do you have air conditioning and heating and stuff also running off that?
If I was in a marina, I've never been an air conditioning person, but I've also always lived somewhere that's got a sea breeze, or now in the boat, I open up hatches and it scoops air through it. I've never had a problem. I've also never stayed in the Caribbean for the summer, but I don't think we go through 95-degree heat streaks. We just went through a good one here, And when I'm on my boss's boat, the modern boats don't have natural ventilation like the old boats do. When I'm on my boss's boat, there are times that I've got to run the air conditioning to stay sane. But on this boat, I mean, I'll be shirt off and that stuff. But it's dark down here. It's cool. I've got a ton of opening port lights and Dorade vents, which Dorade vents seem to be a thing of the past. Modern boat builders don't like Dorades. And
what is a Dorade?
There's a boat called Dorade. It was the first. It's still out there. It's the first boat that ever had them. It sails around here in New England. Sparkman Stevens designed this scoop vent that stands up above the deck. You can point it in the direction of the wind, and it funnels wind into the boat.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They stopped doing those. No way.
Modern boats just don't seem to have them. You know, there are a couple of companies that do. I think Outbound still has them. Maybe Passport as well. A couple of the Passports are some of Bob Perry's builds, and he seemed to always have those Dorades. I imagine your Toshiba probably has them, Merrill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got 4 of them.
Yeah. They're amazing, and you know, you can take a wave right into it and no water will come in. They're really pretty awesome. But yeah, I don't ever have a problem with that. Capability-wise, I could run air conditioning. My guess is I could probably run while I'm sleeping and then recover that with solar on a sunny day.
Well, considering that you've been sailing for a good chunk of your life, how have you seen it change? Are you seeing more sailors come in? Like, what's your take on the maritime industry? Obviously, you're doing, renewables on your boat. So how have you seen that change?
The biggest thing I jump to is boat design. We're in the United States, we're so consumer choice oriented. And I don't buy that. It's not the people who are buying the boat's fault. It's what's being pushed in the marketing. It's just so much easier to sell a boat that is wide open space down below. It looks like you're walking into IKEA. It's all money based. And these boats, I'm not going to say they're not seaworthy because I take a modern boat offshore.
To agree with you though.
all the time. But you watch the YouTube channels and a lot of these modern. And I'm going to say it's basically every large-scale production boat. I'm sitting on a large-scale production boat, but I'm sitting on it from a boat from the 80s. Like, they accidentally made a seaworthy boat, Pearson. And there's stuff you should upgrade before you go offshore on these boats, but they accidentally made a seaworthy boat. Their boats now are technically seaworthy, but you watch these YouTube channels and you see in rough weather, like, people are sleeping. They're out into the cockpit, crowding the people who are on watch. They're sleeping on the cabin sole down below because there are these huge beds stuffed into all corners of the boat, and the corners of the boat are the least comfortable spots. And there's no vent. You get down into the Caribbean on these modern boats, and if you can't run air conditioning off of lithium is going to be a big thing just because people are going to need air conditioning offshore because there's no breeze inside the boat. It's 85 degrees and moist. And the boat they're building boats that have like sunroom windows, but they don't have Dorade vents and they don't have opening ports. And I say this because every year, take these boats down. It's insanely hot. I have a very high heat tolerance and it's rough. And, I have to put down stuff on the settees because people aren't sleeping in their beds and then they're out on the settees and sweating. And so I need to, maintain the interior of the boat for when we arrive versus, there's these old Sparkman Stevens designs that have, 12 berths in a 40-something foot boat, and they're all singles. That's extreme. It's the most comfortable boat you'll ever be in offshore, but it's nice to, lay in bed with someone when you're at anchor, which is 98% of the time. So that's extreme. But having proper sea berths is something of the past. Having handholds and things, not just handholds, but, not having huge open space, like being able to, these linear galleys, you're on port tack and the galley's on port and it's a linear galley. If you fell, you go down 12 feet to the other side of the boat. It's like cooking on the edge of a cliff. So yeah, that's my biggest thing that I'm seeing change. And I'm just at 31, I'm going to be this crotchety boat design person.
When we spoke to Robert Perry and, we were talking about his designs, obviously back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when they were making these boats where they literally just guessed it. But what he was seeing is that every new modern boat that's coming out has the same exact hull shape. They're all exactly the same. There's no real uniqueness. So yeah, I feel you. I go to the boat shows all the time and see those Clorox bottle boats just up for sale for millions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they have a race to the bottom as far as price goes. And they're safe technically, but every big production boat, a perfect example is every big production boat has a bronze, I'd argue they're brass, through hull fitting that is not a proper seacock. It's not a flanged seacock. Like every, Don Casey, anybody you read will say you need a flanged seacock. They're putting in this brass fitting and then they're screwing a ball valve down onto it. Well, a collar first and then a ball valve down onto it. And a lot of those ball valves it's a different kind of metal. The ball's a different kind of metal than the body is. And they have ratings. They're supposed to be a marine bronze alloy, but I'm seeing them come apart within 5 years, especially boats are spending more time. Yeah, go ahead.
That could sink you. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. And, the big ones are Marilon, and I'm fine with, they're plastic, but the boat's made of plastic. I'm fine with it if it's good plastic, and Marilon is. I don't have anything in the fight between bronze seacocks and Marilon, as long as they're inspected. But it's, I think I'm borrowing this from Andy Shell, who might be borrowing it from someone, but you need the rig to stay up, you need the water to stay out of the boat, and you need to maintain steerage. And you don't need anything else. It's really simple to keep these boats safe. And keeping the water out, on the deck, it's important. These new boats all have the same kind of plastic ports and stuff, which, some of the hull windows, I question taking a big wave. What happens if it bashes that window in? I carry big pieces of plywood when I go offshore in case I need to shut it, But keeping the water out, these through hulls need to be, I think, one of the main things to make these boats. Yeah, they're technically seaworthy. They can technically withstand that 500 pounds that they're supposed to withstand. But can they do that 2 years later after sitting in a marina?
But do you think that's planned obsolescence? Sort of like they have done with cars and phones and everything else?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. And I think the biggest part of it is it's just that they're all competing with each other to be the cheapest. And a heavy bronze or even Marilon seacock with flanges is a harder install, so there's labor involved, and it's a more expensive part. These ball valves are, if they aren't regular old home plumbing ball valves, then they are made by the same company with incremental improvements, and they're just not proper seacocks. And but every large-scale production boat, I don't write for any of the magazines, I don't have any advertising concerns, so it's Beneteau owns Jeanneau, they own Lagoon as well. X-Yacht does it. I held them up as like maybe they bill themselves as one of the nicer ones and they're one of the more expensive ones. They do the same kind of seacock, not seacock. They do the same kind of through hull. Every single one, Hansa, every single one of the large scale ones does it.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Sorry, are they?
No, not yet. Yeah. But so you've been doing a lot of boating, but again, not just on your boat. You drive the bigger your boss's boat, the 60-footer.
I do.
And are you like the captain there? Or is he the captain? Like, how does that play out?
Sometimes they go and they do their own sailing thing, but I'm captain project manager. It's basically I run the boat that he's not able to because he's got his own work going on. So if he's not able to move the boat, I do it. I do all the trips north and south because that's a big time suck. And yeah, it's cool working for a capable sailor who also it's unique, who also has the ability to let go. Because, if I'm in charge, I'm in charge. And he's one of those rare people who's able to work on a consensus basis. Like we can sort of decide together what the best plan of action is and doesn't need an argument or anything like that. I bring the boat north and south. Keeping it shiny is the main captain duty. If you're on a bigger boat, you have crew to tell to do it. But I'm the only person who works on that boat regularly. So it's there's a lot of polishing. I just sanded the whole teak deck down.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that was a good 50 hours. But it's maintenance. It's moving the boat around. It's my favorite part, of course, is moving the boat, but that's probably 10% of the job.
Tell us about some of the funnest trips, either on your boat or your boss's boat, or what are the best trips you can remember?
Oh, I have a good video on my Instagram, and I'll repost it. I like to repost it every couple of years. It's just a couple of friends and my boat has a big cockpit. Just sailing offshore, I leave my cockpit cushions on and in storms and stuff. And people are like, "Are you crazy?" And it's like, well, it's nice to be comfortable in bad weather. Yeah. There's a video of us, of me and a few friends, probably day 9 of 12 going out to St. Martin. So we're in the middle of nowhere and we're reaching along. Actually, I think we're sort of tight reach or even upwind, doing about 7.5 knots. And I'm standing up on the corner of the boat filming the cockpit, and they're both laid out and reading in the sun. And while we're, it's the best way to travel. It's slow, but it's the best way to travel. That stands out. No storms. We just had great wind. Went out way past Bermuda and curved down to St. Martin as you should. And maybe 12 hours of calm before we got to the trade winds, and that was about it. But, my first ever trip out to the Caribbean, I left from Florida, and I was waiting for a big nor'easter to turn the trade winds around. And I didn't realize how rare it was at the time. I knew what I was looking for because I've done my reading, but I didn't realize that's a storm that happens maybe twice a winter, maybe. And so I'm waiting weeks and weeks, and I was doing little yacht odd jobs and stuff, but my friends and I were ready to go, and I was like, you know what, this is a sailboat. We'll just tack there. We'll go upwind.
Oh boy.
So we tacked upwind for 1,700 miles.
Oh boy.
Yeah. We motored across the Gulf Stream and then turned the engine off when the trade winds hit in the calm across the Gulf Stream. And then just north of Bimini started our north and south tacking. And we did 4 tacks, and the last tack was 8 days, port tack, 900 miles.
Wow.
7 days, maybe 900 miles. Pretty much rail deep, so we were just living on the starboard side of the boat. And it was awful. It was awful, but it was also like it was really good experience. And going from no wind lighter than 15 knots and up through, we had Christmas winds and stuff coming through. It was blowing 35 at some points down to a staysail and double reef main, and just slamming our way upwind. And I had 2 troopers aboard who even stayed aboard for a little. They didn't jump off immediately when we got to the Caribbean. I was impressed.
Nice. And so this was the first trip to the Caribbean?
That was my first trip as in charge as a skipper.
Okay. And then since then it's become easier?
I don't go to Florida anymore if I can help it.
So you just avoid that whole thing. You just make a beeline.
Yeah. Ironically, the trip is, if you're willing to go offshore, the trip is a lot easier if you leave mid-coast, even as far south as Charleston. But the best place to leave from is Beaufort, North Carolina. You've got it's an easy to find weather window in November, December, and it's a nice trip. It's people are just afraid of going offshore, so they don't go direct from Florida like I did, but they go from Florida through the Bahamas, down Dominican Republic. And there's a lot of annoying upwind sailing if you do it that way. If you leave from mid-coast and go out, almost hit Bermuda, or even go to Bermuda and then down to the islands from there, it's a really nice sail.
So how long have you been living aboard?
6 years.
Okay. So, a lot of people are like, oh, that sounds like amazing. I would love to live aboard. And you always run into people that are like considering it. But who do you think should be a person that should,
Try this.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm a good candidate for living aboard because in a house, I get a little bit too lazy. And, people who like the comforts of home and are able to manage that without getting lazy and are able to deal with a 9-to-5, you should probably keep doing it, because the things, I need water and food to survive, and it's a huge pain in the ass to do that sometimes. It gets to be October. I don't leave usually until November. Up here, it gets to be October. It can be 40, 45 degrees. I'm taking the dinghy ashore in rough weather. That's not fun in tropics. When it's blowing 35 and you have to take the dinghy upwind, that's not fun in the tropics. But in 45 degrees, it's actually not that bad anymore, but only because I'm so used to it. If life is too easy, I don't do well. Some people are not that way. More power to you. But yeah, the hard parts of this are really hard sometimes, but in retrospect, and even at the time, that's what you need.
Is it actually cheaper to live on a boat?
Well, you'll spend as much money as you have, unless you have a lot of discipline. I would say it's cheaper because I spend less of my paycheck than my New York City dwelling friends who make a similar amount of money. New York City's crazy rent and cost of living, though. I mean, I know people who feel like they don't have any money and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I know people who feel like they don't have any money and their paychecks come to $15,000 a year. So you can do it at any budget. And I've done it at any budget. I left the first 3 times I left for the Caribbean, I left with less than $500. And, I got the odd photo gig or the odd delivery job, and $500 goes a long way when it doubles your wealth. But yeah, I've never had this boat insured. I buy really good really good ground tackle. I'm really conservative. It would cost me so much to insure this boat, and they wouldn't let me single hand offshore, that it's not worth it. So I just need to, in the back of my mind, always have a path back to doing this if I really, really screw up. But if I really, really screw up, I can go and stay with my mom or my sister. Not everybody has that. Never had to lean on them for that kind of stuff. But it's something that's your insurance policy if you don't have the probably $6,000 a year to fully hull insure.
When you talked about, being at home and being lazy, it was like yesterday I went over to this like person's land house, and I like walk in, and the first thing I noticed was, holy shit, a dishwasher. Damn, that's nice. That's the only thing I really miss, dishwasher.
My sister found was thrifting, and she found you have to pour the water in and let the water drain out, but it's a clothes portable washer. It's awesome. It's kind of like like a countertop, washing machine, and that kind of stuff. I mean, I do things for the luxury of it. For me, that's what the electric is. I don't have to deal with. I hate oil and diesel. The environmental part that people don't take into account is people are spilling that stuff into the water nearly every time they fill up. It's getting into the bilge, and just when you get oil in the bilge, like getting it out and getting it disposed of is such a pain. So the electric is a luxury that I paid for. I consider my life easier now, even though I have to go slow, even though I can't always go where I want to, which I didn't do before. Some people need to sail that way, but it's not what sailing's about for me. But I consider it a luxury that I paid for. I consider this washer a luxury, but I still have to either go to the dock or haul water for it. I still have to, living at anchor or mooring, I do about a month or two a year at a slip to get my affairs in order before going offshore, or when I go to work in the Caribbean, I don't have a mooring, so I'll go to a slip. But for the most part, living at anchor or mooring is you've got your own island, but you do have to bring everything to and from it. And it keeps me from getting stagnant. But to a lot of people, it might just be a lot of stuff they don't want to deal with, having to lift those jerry cans to fill the boat with water.
What about a water maker, though? Is that the next item? Maybe.
I've come around. I didn't want the maintenance. I don't want to spend. Boats are more maintenance than a house, I think. And I didn't want the maintenance, but it's. I've come around since I've been maintaining the one on the workboat. It's they're not so bad, but they are really expensive. There's not really any way of doing it properly for less than $5,000.
You're a handy guy. You could make your own.
Yeah, but there are so many things I DIY, and you sort of, some things you just want to work, especially a water maker. Like if you start relying on a water maker, then you expect it to work. And then if it stops working, you don't have a plan. And if something stops working that you've come to rely on, it makes your life not fun. And I'm working equal time now. I'm working half the days of the year. I'll do a week on, week off, month on, month off. When I get back to my boat, I want things to be easy.
So tell us more about, maybe we'll go back to like the photography thing. Are you doing more sort of marine stuff, or like what does that look like now? Do you have a drone?
I don't have a drone. I should have a drone. Yeah. The main photography I do is for past clients. Siblings are getting married, and they'll hire me, and friends of friends. So I pretty much do the wedding thing.
Weddings only. Oh.
Yeah. I do a little bit of pro bono nonprofit work. I haven't been back to Haiti since before COVID, but there's a nonprofit down there that I do all of their photos. And I have a pet project about the sweatshops down there that I've been working on. It's been a while since I published anything about that, but it's something that's close to my heart. And
that's more in line with your activism side of things. Tell us more about that.
Sure. We live in tough political times, and especially living on a boat. A lot of people who live on boats or in the boat world are very convinced that they do everything themselves and they don't rely on community. And I think there's a really selfish political attitude in the sailing world, unfortunately. Everybody in the sailing world, don't get me wrong, everybody is really nice. I have friends across every spectrum of politics in the sailing world. But I think it's easy to be out here and be doing as much as I've done. It would be very easy to convince myself that I've done this all on my own and I don't rely on society and I don't owe anything to society. And especially with the politics of the Trump era, people have become very selfish and convinced that people who are less fortunate are just making the wrong choices and being lazy. And that's been a big problem for me in the sailing world. And it's also been a big problem for me because I have a community of friends, but I don't live in community. I don't live in a small town. We're not where people are reliant on their neighbors and helping each other out. And I think that's the natural way of living. And the word community and the political associations with that prefix commune, it's a natural way of living. We should be more connected to each other. We should be relying on each other. And we should, when we create these huge governments that we have, we should be using them for nothing else except making the least of our neighbors' lives better. So I think that's something that's pushed me as far as my photography background. Photojournalism and sociology is what I studied, and going to some of the places that people have it tougher and destigmatizing these places. Haiti has the lowest, even in the struggles recently, I believe they still have the lowest crime rate against foreigners of any Caribbean island. No and way. That's a rate. That's not just because there are fewer of us there. The rate of crime against us is lower. And it's hard to not see that if you actually go, but based on what the news shows, it's hard to believe. I think anybody cruising through the Caribbean hears the stories about which islands to go to and which islands not to go to. But the reality is none of these places are as difficult as our own inner cities. And very few Americans would say, like, I'm not going to go to New Orleans because it's such a high crime rate. No, it's got a high crime rate, but we understand that it's people who are desperate, that it's people who are in drug trades and things like that, and that you carry some risk when you're on Bourbon Street. But if you just understand the place, then you know how to navigate. And that's the same thing with the Caribbean. It just looks, people in the Caribbean, a friend says a lot of people go to the Caribbean and they see what the houses look like. And it looks like a slum. In the United States, it looks like somewhere that you'd avoid. And the calibration is off, because a friend of mine who lived in the Caribbean for a long time said, no, they just buy their houses with actual money. You know, your house here in the United States costs $200,000, $300,000. Yeah. Did you pay for that in cash? Yep. No. People in the Caribbean get $100 and they buy enough cinder block and they build it themselves. They buy enough rebar and cinder blocks and they start building, and they live in the first room that they built. This is Haiti more than other parts of the Caribbean. They live in the first room that they built as they build the rest of the house, and they leave the rebar sticking out up on the second story everywhere in the Caribbean, because when they are ready to add on, it's ready to go, and they put together more money. They're buying things with real money. So our calibration of safety is off. And the reality is that people who aren't dealing in credit and debt are much more attached to the way money actually works. And these are some of the best people in the world. And the stigmas we have against Haiti in particular, but the poorer parts of the world that's a big problem, especially when we're as privileged as we are to be visiting their countries.
I was wondering, so you have a girlfriend? Is she also as much of an activist sailboater as you are?
Yeah. One of the immediate draws is that we both worked on boats. We both have an alternative lifestyle. Liz doesn't have her own boat. She was living mostly either on the boats she was working on or in a crew house when we met. And so when she's not at work, usually she's staying with me on my boat. When we do, I'll hire her as crew. She's become a good sailor herself. She was already used to offshore stuff with the power yachts, but she's become a good sailor herself. So I'll hire her as crew for the trips that we're moving. We do a little bit of, she's a chef, and for a couple of several weeks a year for my boss, we'll charter it up for them. We're a pretty good captain chef team. And yeah, and then outside of that, she takes on freelance gigs. She does some Caribbean charter. She does some of the super yacht stuff. Yeah, and the time off, we've taken up disc golf last couple of years. I've always wanted to be a hiker, but I don't go out for the beauty of it itself. I need something sort of competitive. And so I'll go out and throw discs, and that makes me see especially in the spring, some frogs and snakes, and especially going out at dawn or dusk. The woods are really pretty that time of year. And I think people who like the woods and people who like the water are similar, but there's not a lot of crossover because they're not in the same place.
Well, it's funny that you say that. It's like, I hate the woods and I don't ever go swimming, yet I thru hike the Appalachian Trail and I live on a boat, right? I'm just like out there for the challenge.
Yeah, there's a photographer named Aaron Huey. He walked across the United States with his dog after he was out of college. And I haven't done anything quite like that for a long time. The solo offshore trips are tapping into
Close
that.
Enough, right?
Yeah, I backpacked through the Middle East, primarily through Palestine, solo backpacked without really knowing where I was going to sleep at night. And Haiti, I left where the nonprofit had put me up and went up to northern Haiti because I knew there was a sweatshop up there. I didn't speak the language, and I didn't really know how to do anything, but I took public transportation and got myself up there. And you learn a lot about the world that way, and you connect with people a lot that way. And I actually, I'll compared to that, the comfort of having my own boat and living aboard has made me kind of soft lately, I think.
True that.
When you went from van to boat, actually starting to live on a boat, what caught you by surprise?
It can be tough to find a place. Van life is easier for the average person, but the whole finding where to park and sleep at night thing is harder than once you have some sailing experience. Anchorages, at least on the east coast of the U.S. and the Caribbean, you might have to keep moving, but they're common. It's not hard to find somewhere to stay. And that part is easier. You're on the East Coast, for the most part, you can pretty much anchor where it's safe to anchor. And that's a lot of freedom over van life. I didn't expect, but I think a lot of it has to do with the privilege. Most people who are sailing have a lot of money, and the world is set up for people with money. So we're sort of masquerading as millionaires, right? And I think a really important thing, friends who want to do what I do, look at my sailing background. It's certainly an advantage that I've known how to sail my whole life. But knowing how to sail is as simple as buying an Optimist or a laser and going out and teaching yourself, and especially getting into there are laser fleets for adults all over the place. If you're racing a laser in an adult fleet, you learn how to sail really quickly. And you learn how to sail at honestly a higher level than a lot of people who retire and learn how to sail on a 40-something, 50-something foot boat. Because the consequences of a jibe can be very high on a big boat, but big boats are more forgiving in general. And you turn the engine on when you're not sailing right. Laser doesn't have an engine. It's light air. You have to figure out how to get to shore. It teaches you a lot, and these fleets are really welcoming. So I think people need to, if people who are trying to do this thing, you need to buy a boat, a laser, get one for $800. Go out and sail it yourself in light wind. Have a spotter, have something, have a radio with you, but do it safely, be conservative, but go learn how to sail. You don't need to take sailing lessons. And then I sailed a lot on bigger boats as crew, and there are things you learn, but buying a 35 foot boat, reading John Kretschmer's books, reading Lynn and Larry Party's books, reading what's out there, figuring out a good boat I think 35 is a great size for a beginner. It sounds big, but get a mooring because you can come on and off of that. It's not scary to do that. Just be conservative. You have to teach yourself, because the places that I went when I was crew, people ask me about an anchorage and I'm like, yeah, I went there as crew, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was following the captain's orders. And so I just don't remember the places that I went. I can't remember what the holding was like. I can't remember where the channel is. You don't learn that stuff until you're doing it yourself. Yeah, watch the YouTube channels for the excitement. Read the Hiscocks, read Lynn and Larry Party, read John Kretschmer, listen to podcasts like this. Get the information and be conservative, but you have to do it yourself, and that's how you learn. I think people should go for that. And when you hear people like me say that, we're approachable. Send me an email. Send John Kretschmer an email. He has classes. You can pay for his captain's hour classes, and then he'll open it up for questions. I mean, we want people to have this complicated freedom that we've got ourselves. It's yachting has been a closed gated community for too long, and it's even getting a little bit worse right now. My generation has a hard time paying rent, let alone buying a boat. So yeah, none of us who are in the yachting world want to see it be a gated community, but none of us have been all that good about opening the gates either, I think.
True. Okay. And so you sort of mentioned this already, but where can people find out about you and what you've been up to and your photos?
I think these days my Instagram is the best spot. My name's Robert Carpenter Shook, and that's what my handle is on Instagram. Yeah, follow me on Instagram. Send me a message. I'm excited about other people sailing, whether you have a boat or you're trying to get into it. Yeah, send me a message.
Yeah, I'm hoping you get lots more like electrical questions, because I think that's part of the future, is that we take all of these older boats, put in some new engines into them, make them seaworthy again. Yeah, everybody has fun.
I did this before you told me that California was getting rid of diesel by
and it's official law. Happened day before yesterday.
Yeah, you told me that April, right?
Yeah, and months ago.
Yeah. So yeah, it's happening. And electric is the whole being this far away from engineless, sailing all the time. That's not for everybody. It's not for most people, maybe. But I think it's worth looking into, putting in the electric motor, seeing how much you consume, and then putting in a generator to match what you want your performance to be. That's a hybrid. And at some point, you're going to rip that generator out for whatever the next increase in solar is, or maybe hydrogen is we're going to hopefully get these little suitcase hydrogen generators, and maybe we'll replace that eventually. But that electric motor and those lithium batteries, that technology is here. It's here right now. So if you need a range extension or you need to go a little bit faster, put a generator in. But switching over is amazing, because putting that throttle into forward, and it's like you're sailing, but there's no sails up. It's so quiet and vibration free, and there's almost no maintenance. For the right kind of person, that's a huge liveaboard benefit.
Well, I'm going to hedge my bets that my next engine on my Toshiba 36 is going to be a nuclear reactor.
There you go.
Good luck. Do it, Mel. Make one. Yeah. No, but Robert, it was great speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your experience and adventures and stories. And hopefully, people will have enjoyed the pictures and videos as well. And best of luck with all your adventures. Keep up the snowbird lifestyle. I know lots of people aspire to it, so it's good to sort of hear from you firsthand and tell us it is as good as it sounds. Yeah, and best of luck, man. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Your podcast has been great. I'm a podcast nut, and yours is quickly climbing the list of my favorites. So I'm going to keep in touch and keep listening. I'm excited about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, love it, man. Thank you. We are excited about your stuff, so keep it up.
Sounds good.
Good talking to you.
Take care.
Check back every Tuesday for our latest episode, and be sure to like, share and subscribe to SHIPSHAPE.pro.